Summer, 1940. Europe was drowning in darkness. One by one, nations fell like dominoes before an unstoppable force. Poland, crushed within weeks. France, the mighty fortress of Europe, defeated in 40 days. The Low Countries, overrun before they could even mount a defense. Across the scarred continent, a single name sent shivers down spines: Adolf Hitler. His war machine had devoured everything in its path with terrifying efficiency. Blitzkrieg, they called it. Lightning war. And now, separated only by a narrow strip of water called the English Channel, one final enemy remained standing, defiant and alone: Britain. From the Cold War rooms of Berlin, German strategists studied maps with predatory focus. The island nation looked vulnerable, isolated, bleeding from 1,000 wounds. At Dunkirk, the British Army had barely escaped annihilation, abandoning tanks, artillery, and ammunition on French beaches. They limped home broken, defeated. On paper, Britain appeared ripe for the taking, the perfect prey. Hitler gave the order: prepare the invasion. The operation received a deceptively calm code name: Operation Sea Lion. But beneath that peaceful title lurked a gamble so dangerous, so unprecedented, that even battle-hardened German generals felt ice in their veins when they examined the details. This wasn't France. This wasn't Poland. This was different. Terrifyingly different. To conquer Britain, Germany faced an obstacle unlike any they'd encountered before: the sea itself. An invasion force would need to cross open water, exposed and vulnerable. Not just soldiers, but tanks weighing tons, artillery, pieces, fuel trucks, ammunition stockpiles, field hospitals, everything an army needs to wage war. Thousands of vessels would be required: barges, tugboats, rivercraft, anything that could float. All moving slowly, packed together like sitting ducks, and waiting for them in those dark waters: the Royal Navy. Britain's first line of defense wasn't soldiers with rifles. It was steel warships bristling with guns. The realization hit German commanders like a physical blow. They didn't just need to defeat Britain's army. They had to survive. Britain's navy first. The Royal Navy remained the most powerful fleet on Earth. Even bloodied from battles in Norway and France, Britain possessed more major warships than Germany could ever hope to match. Battleships capable of reducing invasion barges to splinters, cruisers hunting in wolf packs, destroyers fast enough to intercept any crossing attempt. German planners ran simulation after simulation, war games, theoretical scenarios, timetables, calculated down to the minute. And every single time, the same nightmare scenario emerged from the data. The invasion fleet could be annihilated before reaching British shores. Imagine it. Tens of thousands of Germany's best soldiers, trapped on slow-moving barges, caught in open water as British naval guns opened fire. No escape, no cover. Just burning metal and screaming men swallowed by cold Channel waters. It wouldn't just be a military defeat. It would shatter the myth of German invincibility forever. Hitler faced the brutal truth. The sea was too dangerous. But there was one alternative, one desperate gamble that might tilt the odds. If they couldn't control the sea, they had to control something else: the sky. The directive came down from Berlin like thunder: destroy the Royal Air Force, completely, utterly. Leave nothing flying in British skies. The task fell to the Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Without air superiority, Operation Sea Lion was suicide. The strategy seemed straightforward, almost surgical. Bomb British airfields into rubble, destroy their radar stations, those mysterious towers that somehow detected incoming aircraft. Hunt down RAF fighters and shoot them from the sky. Once Britain's air defenses collapsed, German bombers could dominate the Channel. The Royal Navy, with no air cover, would be exposed to devastating attack. British coastal defenses would crumble under relentless bombardment. Only then, with the skies firmly under German control, would the invasion barges cross the Channel. What? began was later called the Battle of Britain, the first major military campaign fought entirely in the air. History had never seen anything like it. And initially, terrifyingly, Germany appeared to be winning. Day after day, German aircraft swarmed across the Channel like angry hornets, fighters screaming overhead, bombers in tight, deadly formations. RAF airfields were pummeled, hangars erupted in flames, runways cratered. British pilots scrambled into combat with barely enough time to breathe between missions, let alone sleep. From Berlin, intelligence reports painted a rosy picture. The RAF was buckling, radar stations damaged, aircraft losses mounting. Some squadrons, reduced to single-digit numbers of operational fighters. German commanders allowed themselves to believe Britain's air defense was weeks, maybe days, from total collapse. They weren't entirely wrong. The truth was grimmer than Britain publicly admitted. Fighter losses were catastrophic. Replacement pilots arrived young, undertrained, terrified. Some flew their first combat mission and never returned. Experienced squadron leaders were dying faster than they could be replaced. The entire system was teetering on the edge of a cliff. The pressure had continued just a few more weeks. Britain's air defense might have shattered completely. But then fate intervened. Not through brilliant strategy, but through rage and accident. One night, German bombers strayed off course and accidentally dropped their payload on London. Civilians died in their homes. Fires consumed neighborhoods. It wasn't a planned military strike, but people were dead nonetheless. Britain's response was swift and shocking, a retaliatory raid on Berlin itself. The physical damage was minimal, a handful of bombs on Germany's capital, but the psychological impact was nuclear. For the first time, German civilians watched their own city burn. Adolf Hitler, consumed by fury at this humiliation, made a decision that would alter the war's entire trajectory. Forget the airfields, forget the radar stations, bomb London, make Britain pay. The Luftwaffe's orders changed instantly, from military targets to civilian ones, from strategic bombing to revenge attacks. On the surface, it looked like escalation, like tightening the noose. But militarily, it was a catastrophic gift to Britain. When German bombers turned toward London, RAF airfields finally got breathing room. Repair crews worked frantically on cratered runways. Radar stations came back online. Exhausted pilots rotated out for desperately needed rest. The British air defense system, which had been mere days from collapse, stabilized. Fighter command survived. Meanwhile, German pilots now faced a deadlier equation. Longer flights meant less fuel for combat, less margin for error. British defenses, given time to reorganize, grew more effective. German losses mounted. The quick, decisive victory the Luftwaffe needed slipped further away with each passing day. And Operation Sea Lion. It was quietly dying. German naval commanders had been clear from the beginning. Without absolute air superiority, an invasion fleet crossing the Channel would be a floating graveyard. Now that superiority was evaporating like morning mist. Without destroying the RAF, the Royal Navy could operate freely. Without stopping the Royal Navy, those slow German barges would be helpless targets. Inside German headquarters, the atmosphere changed. Operation Sea Lion was no longer discussed as when. Now it was if, and the more honestly planners examined the scenario, the more terrifying it became. By autumn 1940, the invasion wasn't being planned with confidence. It was being sustained by denial and desperate hope. The air war had failed. The RAF still flew. Radar still worked. British fighters still rose daily to meet German bombers. And now, stripped of illusions, German planners confronted the raw mathematics of invasion. Cold, brutal, undeniable. The crossing alone was a nightmare scenario. To invade Britain, Germany needed to transport over 100,000 troops in the first wave. That required hundreds of barges, tugboats, converted river vessels, all crammed with men, horses, vehicles, fuel, ammunition. Most of these craft were never designed for open sea. They were slow, unstable, vulnerable. They would cross at night, moving at bicycle speed in tight formations, through waters patrolled by British destroyers. German naval officers ran the numbers obsessively, even with favorable weather, even with surprise, even with weakened British air power. They still couldn't guarantee protection from fast Royal Navy warships charging into the Channel under cover of darkness. Fast warships versus slow barges packed with soldiers. It wouldn't be a battle, it would be a slaughter. A massacre written in mathematical certainty, and even if by some miracle troops reached British shores, the beaches weren't empty. Britain had mined coastlines, erected barriers, positioned artillery. Regular army units, home guard militias, even armed civilians awaited any invasion force. German troops would arrive seasick, scattered, running low on supplies, facing defenders fighting for their homeland. Unlike France, there would be no lightning breakthrough. British forces could counterattack from multiple directions, cutting off beachheads before reinforcements arrived. The invasion force could be trapped between the sea and an aroused nation, defending its soil, stranded, isolated, destroyed. The nightmare scenario became clear. If the first wave failed, tens of thousands of Germany's best troops would die or be captured, with no possibility of rescue under British naval gunfire. Germany had never risked losing an entire army in a single operation. Operation Sea Lion threatened to become the worst military disaster in German history. Reports flooded Hitler's desk. Naval warnings, Luftwaffe limitations, weather uncertainties, logistical impossibilities. The invasion was no longer a bold stroke of genius. It was a suicide mission with catastrophic odds. Hitler postponed the operation, then postponed it again, then simply stopped mentioning it. Operation Sea Lion was never officially cancelled. It faded like a ghost. When Operation Sea Lion quietly vanished from German planning documents, the world barely noticed. No dramatic announcement, no admission of failure, no public acknowledgement. The invasion that terrified Britain simply stopped being discussed, erased from war room conversations like it never existed. But that silence, that unspoken abandonment, it would reshape the entire war. Because Britain survived, it became something Germany could never destroy, an unsinkable fortress. An aircraft carrier that couldn't be sent to the ocean floor, a supply hub forever beyond the reach of German ground forces, a staging ground for future operations. From British airfields, bomber streams would eventually strike deeper into German territory, night after night. From British ports, convoys would carry the weapons, vehicles, and supplies that would sustain Allied armies. Most critically, Britain became the place where Germany's enemies could gather safely, regroup, and plan their revenge. If Britain had fallen in 1940, history's path would have twisted in unimaginable directions. But because it held on, bloodied but unbroken, the United States had an ally still fighting when it entered the war. Allied leaders had a secure location for strategic meetings. Resistance movements across occupied Europe knew defeat wasn't inevitable. When American forces began arriving, millions would pass through Britain, training there, organizing there, preparing there for the great return to Europe. Britain became the massive springboard from which Allied armies would leap back onto the continent. That return came in June 1944 on the beaches of Normandy. If Britain had been conquered, D-Day might never have happened. Hitler's fateful choice echoed forward through time like ripples from a stone cast into dark water. When he abandoned the British invasion, he pivoted east toward the Soviet Union, launching the largest land invasion in human history. That eastern gamble consumed men, equipment, fuel, and time resources that might have supported a renewed attempt against Britain. They were swallowed instead by the vast, frozen hell of the Eastern Front. The decision not to invade Britain didn't merely avoid one disaster. It locked Germany onto a different path entirely, one that would stretch its armies beyond breaking point, fighting enemies on multiple fronts simultaneously. The invasion that never happened still won the war. No German soldier ever stormed British beaches. No swastika flag flew over Buckingham Palace. No occupation government ruled from Westminster. But the failed invasion plan shaped the war's outcome just as surely as any battle, because Britain survived long enough to become the anvil on which Germany would be crushed from the west, while the Eastern Front consumed it from the east. This terrifying truth wasn't that Germany feared Britain's army. It was simpler, more fundamental. The sea, the sky, and cold mathematical reality made invasion a gamble so suicidal that even the most aggressive, reckless regime in Europe chose not to roll those dice. And in that single decision, made in quiet, war rooms without fanfare or announcement, the future of the war silently, irrevocably shifted. Operation Sea Lion died not with a bang, but with a whisper. And that whisper changed the world.